Yes, we are live. Jeff in the comments says howdy, and we say howdy to Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
So, how do we get you to? You're in your office, I take it, Scott.
I am.
Which
It's
is not
Mother's
in.
Day at home, and
I
the
was
kids
gonna
are running
say,
around, and
how did
yeah.
how did we get you to get away from Mother's Day?
So I told her that I forgot when I committed to this that it was Mother's Day, which was the truth. But we're not really doing much anyway. She went and bought a bicycle for herself yesterday, and that is her Mother's Day gift. And the boys made handmade cards, and so that's kind of the extent of it. We let each other off the hook this season for all that kind of stuff.
Was there?
Same thing happened Father's Day.
She
So,
didn't have to cook breakfast, right? Someone else made breakfast.
well, in theory, that was the plan, but she said she was hungry and she made some bagels or something, and um, so we planned. I told the boy, my boys are one's about to turn 10, the other one's 7, so they're supposed to take care of her today instead of annoy her all day. So we'll see what it's like when I get back to the house. But
We'll just keep you here all day.
yeah, I'll just say sorry, honey. I know it's 8 p.m., but we ran long, so
Yeah, right. No, we'll be done in half an hour, and you're going to stay at the office all day long. It's like we ran long. Just say I was
that's right.
watching the live show, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, we can turn this into a sort of a marathon where we donate the proceedings to some good cause. That I did just check. The previous podcast made 47 cents. So maybe if we keep it up at a 24-hour rate, then we have at least a couple dollars.
We get a few dollars and go
Yeah,
towards a good cause, and
yeah, exactly. So I think it's a great idea. We should do this 24-hour. I don't know what this
We're stumbling over what to call it, and we want to go
podcast-a-thon.
on for 24 hours. But I want to get back to the 7-year-old and the 10-year-old. Are we homeschooling?
yes, they're both Montessori kids, and so they get trained from an early age to kind of go on their own track. And the older one, for instance, he has a planner, and they go in every Monday morning and they plan out their whole week's work, and so he's kind of used to being self-directed, as it were. And this has been and they were already using Google Classroom and a lot of that kind of stuff, so it's been a fairly easy transition for him. It's just that they miss their classmates and miss the social aspect of it. But they quickly picked up the Zoom thing, and they Zoom every day with their classroom. And then in Montessori, they're broken into 3 grades, so he's with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And then they break off later in the day, like into their grade, so he'll have like 7 people in his class for a smaller lesson or something from the teacher that's age appropriate. The younger one, it's been a little bit more of a struggle. He's 7 years old. He's not quite self-directed yet, and so he needs more attention. And he gets if you leave him. My wife Tammy, she works from home anyway during this time. I mean, she's able to work from home a lot. She's been working from home this whole time, but she has to take calls. Her company is owned by a Belgian company, and they're used to doing this anyway. They're talking at all weird hours around the globe, and so she might have a 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. call, and so if I'm not there, then the little one, he gets started late, and all that kind of stuff. So he's been kind of spotty. He's also at a weird age for this kind of thing to go on, because he's aware of everything that's happening, but it's harder for him to kind of process it.
Right.
The older one is, I mean, we're all kind of
It's
struggling
kind
to
of hard
process.
for all of us, isn't it?
So,
So that
but
sounds
yeah,
like they're doing well, and you don't really have to be much of a teacher since uh, the school is
not
taking
too
care of
much.
everything.
Yeah, it's hard enough just to learn whatever they're supposed to learn. Usually, telling us, Daddy, this is how you do this stuff.
Yeah, they're teaching you really.
Yeah. So I've learned a lot though in the last couple.
And Dr. Brown, your students, how are they handling it?
with varying levels of enthusiasm.
Because you're not using Zoom or anything that the rest of us might be using. You're using something
No, I
proprietary
think
to the college, right?
yeah. Well, there. I think it is important to make a distinction between what the classes look like at the end of the winter term and at the start of the fall term now, because at the end of the winter term, everybody had to scramble to suddenly move courses online, which in some cases is easier than in other cases. I mean, for me, it was not a huge transition, but if you teach arc welding, then I mean, I don't really know how you would quickly move that online. So, if at all, actually. So there has been, I don't really want to say unrest, but I think there is a little bit of concern from some students that the fall term is going to be, in some cases, as chaotic as the end of the winter term was, where all the instructors had to scramble to quickly move on to an online platform. However, of course, now everybody has months to prepare their courses and to make everything much smoother. So I don't really expect real problems. I can't speak for everyone, but within my field of psychology, I don't expect much problems or many problems.
Are there summer courses, or are you getting that time off to prepare?
Yeah, well, that's another thing. So there are a couple of spring courses going on now. I'm not involved in those this year. We rotate those. There are no summer courses for us, but there will be. We will really start up in fall again. So we really have that time to prepare. So I think it will be very possible to come up with really good courses that you can do online. But there are certain challenges. Like I have a course where I let students play with anatomical models of the brain so that they get to feel where everything is. Well, you can't do that online, right? You can't hold the things. I can show, I guess, rotation videos of things, but I mean, I can't give you the thing to hold and fondle. So there will be some challenges, but they are, I think, in my case, relatively minor. So I think we can offer students a very good set of courses that will run very smoothly, but it's, yeah, in some cases there will be some challenges. But again, we have it, I think, relatively easy compared to some professions where it's not possible to do something online.
Did you say that your college has made the decision that fall is also going to be online?
Yeah, fall is online. It's not just this college, it's a province-wide decision made by all the presidents to do that. And a lot of students were very disappointed because they want to get back into the classroom, and a lot of instructors were very disappointed because we want to get back into the classroom, but you also have to look at the greater good, right? And I think the wise decision here is ask yourself if you want to be in a room tightly packed with 85 people sitting all right next to each other at this point in time. And I mean, I of course understand everybody wants to get back to being in a classroom, and yes, you miss the social interaction with your fellow students, with your instructors, with fellow instructors, with everything. But I don't think it's the wise decision right now.
Do you think, I heard a friend of ours, their daughter was somewhere in an expensive school, and she had one more year, and she said she was going to take a year off because she didn't want to and she kind of had I can't remember the degree, but something hands-on. Do you think it'll hurt enrollment?
Well, that is something that I am concerned about, and I think that a couple of students will definitely do that. And on the other hand, there don't seem to be any alternatives, so it's not like they can say, well, let's go to this university or this college because they are doing face-to-face there. It seems like no one is doing that, so that's an issue. But yeah, I mean, I could see how people would do that. I also think that initially there is that reaction of well, then I'm just going to work for a year or whatever. But on the other hand, once the realization sinks in but then you delay your degree a year, you delay your career a year. I don't know if everyone will really follow through with it. I'm sure that some people will, but I don't know if as many will as the original. Yeah. My term for this is #pandemic panic, right? So like it's no, everything is. Well, I mean, I think once that settles a bit, then yeah.
Yeah. Things need to settle. We'll get through this.
We will. But we all have to make these kinds of efforts, right? It's these kinds of things. Yes. Like maybe we can't be face-to-face, or maybe we can't do this. But because of that, with eyes on the greater good, it's not about
that's like, I hear a lot of sympathy for the high school seniors missing that. And while I do feel for them, I also think, well, gosh, that's kind of a first world problem,
it is.
The two high school girls across the street, I polled them, and asked them whether they liked it better this way or would they prefer to be in school. The younger one, a sophomore, said she would like to be in school, and the one that's older, well, she'll be a rising senior, said she prefers it actually the way it is right now, working.
Yes.
Yeah, so some of them may actually enjoy it. So.
Yep.
I'm going to get this party started, gentlemen. I'm going to play a video, and we will be right into it. This
video.
Is That a Pen in Your Podcast, episode number 9, for Sunday, May 10th, 2020. We are streaming to you live from the United States and Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, viewers the world over, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to another maternal episode of Fountain Pen Television. My name is Eric, and joining me, as per usual, the noise to my maker, Professor Dr. Stephen Brown. But wait, there's more. Our special guest, the pen father himself, Mr. Scott Franklin. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I think that it was a missed opportunity to not say the Scott father, but I guess the pen father.
Well, that can be his nickname.
It's Crop.
While we were chatting in the green room, I did see a question in the chat, and it was a question for Scott specifically. I have small handwriting. I'm thinking of getting a SIG nib because it's slightly stubby. What do you recommend, fine or medium? I'll let you take it.
Well, if you truly have small handwriting, I would recommend a fine. Whenever you deal with an italicized nib, the finer you go, the more subtle the line variation. So you may not see these sort of magnificent calligraphic letters with small handwriting, but you're not anyway with small handwriting. If you get too broad, you're going to sort of muddle your letters, and the ink's going to run together. So I would probably say a fine if you truly have small handwriting.
So we do
extra line is their option, but
point counterpoint. I can't do that because I agree with you, Brown.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think you could also live on the edge and get a double broad and then see what happens, and how much of a success that will be. We will hear on the next
straight lines
podcast.
Across the page and say, what do you mean you can't read my handwriting? Yes, I also have small handwriting and everything. I always pick a fine. The broads are fun to play with and fun to put ink on paper, but not for actual writing. Brown, you have large handwriting, so you like broads that put a lot of ink on the paper.
This is true.
And so, yes, I have to do the same thing. I have to get a fine cursive italic, and you don't see the line variation as much as you would if you had a wider nib. But I can live with that because I'd prefer to be able to read my writing after the fact.
Yeah, plus you can always put it under a microscope and then everything looks bigger.
Exactly.
Brilliant solutions to non-existent problems.
We'll take binoculars to our faces. How's that?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and then everything is much closer all of a sudden.
Well, the older we get, the more we have to magnify things to see them anyway. So
yeah, there's another, not a question, but a comment in the comment section. Funny place to find it. There should be a Franklin Christoph retail in Europe! ! Surely you have some Europeans selling your pens?
Not really.
Say no. Okay.
It's our company philosophy. To work under our business model, we need to maintain 90% direct sales. And whenever you sell to a physical shop, you give them 2/3 of your margin. And so we made that choice a long time ago, that we're primarily an online entity, and we're a brand that kind of started that way. And it's hard for these bigger established brands, although they all seem to want to do it, to be able to effectively sell directly, but they tend to go through distributors and then retailers, and there's just several different layers. We like to be direct to the client. So to get around some of the problems with that, we offer it's free shipping for most every pen. If you're outside the United States and your order is $100 or more, you get free shipping. We have people in Australia tell us that they get packages quicker from us. They get them in 2 or 3 days via FedEx versus ordering domestically. It takes about a week to get there. So, and then we have, free returns within 30 days, no questions asked. Also within the United States, but we'll even encourage people sometimes if you're not sure between 2 models, buy both of them, try them out, see which one you like the best, and then send the one back for a full refund that you don't prefer. And so we have people take us up on that. It is an inhibitor, yes, that you can't go to somewhere and test pens. But if you look at the amount of true pen shops there are in the world anymore, the majority of the population doesn't really have a close by. Not everybody can live in Appleton, Wisconsin, where they can pop by the Andersons and test out all the pens. Most people live somewhere where it's an inhibitor anyway, that it would be too far to go to physically test things. So that's just kind of a decision we've made. In the past, we have had a retailer here, a retailer there, and we've even had a retailer in India. We do have one in Singapore. So there are some exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, we try to stay direct to client with our business model.
Some retailers have their own models. Is that true or not true?
That's not true.
Not true.
They have exclusives, so they're existing models that we sell. So the Model 02, for instance, that we'll talk about later, they can choose their own material or their own combination of materials, and that's their exclusive. And so that sort of helps it become a win-win. It gives them something there's no direct competition for. It gives them something special, and it gives us advertising to their client base. So they get something that's good and it's easy to sell, and we get some exposure. So all those relationships have been fruitful and positive.
Excellent. You mentioned the O2, so I'm going to throw a picture of the O2 onto the screen. You won't see it, but everyone else will. In fact, they're looking at it now. I've seen you at the Philly show doing roundtables explaining how this pen was designed. Can you give us a little info on that?
Yeah, at those roundtables, I kind of start at the earliest design, which was like the 40 Panther and the Model 19, and go through and show the history. With the 40 Panther, we had a long cap pen, but I wanted the barrel to be long enough to hold a converter, so it could be that triple thread of cartridge, converter, eyedropper filled. So in order to keep the long cap from not making the pen this long when you post it, to make it postable, we developed a taper in the center of the barrel. So if you look at the O2, the O2 came shortly after that. It's one of our earlier models. We exaggerated that taper with a regular size cap, and I'll show one here on the screen, so that when you post it, it posts very deeply.
Gotcha.
Because the back end of the barrel is clearing all the threads and everything in there, and it sits right there. So you get a short, well-balanced pen. So if you're very sensitive to balance when you write, the O2 can be a very comfortable pen to write with while posted. At the same time, it's not a short barrel, so it's able to do the triple thread, and you're able to write with it. For those who don't like to post the cap, it's still plenty long to achieve that. So that's sort of the history of this. We also, the original O2s had the sharp threads right here, but I never liked that. The way I hold a pen, it always would get my knuckle right there. So we developed these, what we call block threads, and moved them to the end. So they're both comfortable if you do put your fingers on them. Some people put them way down by the nib and can write with them, but for the most part, they're out of the way. So you just don't have sharp threads digging in you for those long writing sessions. So those are the two fundamental things. Of course, we do our aesthetic things that we put the Franklin Christoph bevel that we put on the top of every pen and even the bottom of most pens. So, but the thing that's more unique about the O2 is that what we call an exaggerated center taper that allows for that deep posting.
Yeah, you mentioned threads near your fingers where you grip a pen, and so I had to open my 66, which is my favorite, and
Right.
those threads are way at the end.
Right. Same as the O2. Yeah.
Oh, the O2 has them way up there. All right, so you're
Right.
just
Most
not.
pens do. Yeah. The
No,
30.
I've never found those obnoxious though. I
No.
find because they're quite
They're
wide,
very wide.
Right.
so I don't find them sharp or annoying.
What is this?
really.
Is this a quarter turn to close it completely? It's
Try to gauge that to be a quarter to a half turn. I don't like pens you have to
I know.
do this too, so, but it needs to be enough that it'll stay on there. We find a quarter is the minimum, and sometimes a half is more ideal for the turn. But yeah, Stephen, even on the pens where we don't move the threads down to the end because they're block threads, they're quite comfortable.
Yeah.
Compared to
Yeah,
sharp.
no, that is something I've always found very nice about Frank Christoph pens. It's never anything uncomfortable to dig into your skin or something. That's really cool.
Right. Right.
There's a question I think you've answered, but we'll ask again. Came from comments. How many filling systems do you have at Franklin Christoph? And I'm going to say, well, 3.
3. We had originally planned. There was a lot of call for piston fillers early on, and we even bought some mechanisms. We engineered some things, but what happened is when we started making the ice pens and then later the antique glass and Italian ice and these clear pens, it really became a popular thing to eyedropper those pens. It used to be the only people that knew about eyedroppering were guys over 70 that grew up doing it that way, that literally had pens from the 30s, and some of them were eyedropper only to start with, some of those old safety pens and whatnot. But as people discovered how to eyedropper a pen and how nice that could look in a clear pen where you can see your ink sloshing around, the demand for a piston filler, which is still popular to some, but it's restrictive. You can't use cartridges. You can't eyedropper it. It's hard to clean. They also tend to break and are hard to repair and all those kind of things. So we just kind of put that to the wayside, and we do what we call the triple threat thing, where just about every pen, as long as it can fit a converter, a couple of our pocket pens don't, but most of our pens, it's cartridges, converters, eyedropper.
Can all of your pens be eyedroppered?
Yes, the ones that have bands, like say the Model 19 has a band right in the middle of the barrel, our official stance is that we don't recommend it because in theory, anywhere you have a seam, ink can get through. But in reality, those bands are 3 times as thick on the inside as what you see on the outside, and they're threaded to fit all those pieces together, and they're glued. So the chances of there being a way for ink to get out are very, very slim. And the people who have eyedroppered that pen we've never had a reported problem of it. So for the most part, I'd say yes. The one exception might be the Model 25. It has the downward pointing nib and it has the clip system. The new one is a little bit more simple than the old one that had a spring-loaded clip, but the new one that has the clip in it, you do have that clip hole with a screw holding that clip in that in theory ink could get out. If it did, it would only get into the interior of the finial, but then from there it could get out. But if you put a little grease somewhere, you don't want to put grease on the inside where the ink's going to hit it, but if you put grease on the finial, just in case it got through the screw, you'd probably be fine. But so those two, the 25 and the 19, we don't officially recommend, but
you've seen it done.
I've seen it done.
Question in the comments: are the Franklin Christoph nibs made in house?
No. They're made in Germany by a company called Yobo. Then we have we have different nib tips that then get customized, and all the SIG that is, people know the late Jim Rouse mostly developed. The SIG is now done by Audrey Madison. We do that work in-house. Michael Masseyama does all the Masseyama tips, but the nibs themselves come from Jowo in Germany, with the exception of the steel flex nib, which comes from a new company that is in India that we have tried out. So we're sold out of those
really?
steel flex nibs right now, but
how
and
well
they
we'll
are
be able to see this, but this is a steel flex nib that's getting lots of reflection on it,
right.
but it has cutouts or in the side and no breather hole really. You can't see it here. I'm sorry about that, but the slit goes way down into the nib and does a fantastic job.
It's been a good one. We're trying to decide whether to keep that one or the gold one that's made by Jowo. And fortunately, we didn't discontinue the gold, because as we have been out a long time of the steel, we've had the gold version to offer. They're both truly modern semi-flex nibs. They're not wet noodle nibs, but as a modern pen company, you almost can't sell wet noodle nibs because 50% of them will come back to you sprung. So we have to stay within a range that's really semi-flex to keep the nib stable.
That makes sense. I always think I often have this feeling that people buy any type of flex nib and then think that the handwriting comes along with it, which unfortunately is not. It's not like the beautiful copper plate type stuff does not come free with the nib. And then I do think there is some ideas that any nib can be flexed tremendously. And I mean, of course, it's true. I mean, any nib flexes once. So there is that. But still, to actually use it is requires a lot of skill.
It's quite different than italicized nibs. Italicized nibs kind of do that work for you. And I don't have the best, neatest handwriting, but when I use a nice stub or italic or a SIG nib, it really improves my handwriting and gives it more character without me really changing anything. With a flex nib, it's a learned skill to be able to do that. So you see these people, Aziza and these other people that are so good at doing the flex, and you think, well, that's something must be wrong with my nib, because when I do it, it doesn't do that. It takes some time to learn that skill. For some people, we find with our flex nibs, they just like the way it feels, even though they're not really doing a lot of line variation with the different pressure. But they like the way it feels because it feels kind of soft or spongy to them. And so, that's fun.
And I should mention that you don't have to flex with this nib.
Right.
You can write without using its flexible capabilities just as easily as... And it's a very good pen to learn some flex with, too, rather than taking out a wet noodle for the first time ever. You can learn where pressure should be applied with this nib, and I don't think... Obviously, it would be possible to damage this nib, but not as easily as a wet noodle vintage.
Well, and some of those, solid gold nibs that are 100 years old are not replaceable very easily. And so, you really want to know what you're doing to use one of those.
I'm going to throw up a picture of the 55 now.
Got one right here.
Which looks very much like the 02. What are the differences?
Well, it's quite a bit smaller. I can put the 2 up here. You can maybe see.
Yes.
So it's both shorter and more narrow in diameter. This is our latest design. It's the reason I thought we could talk about it. When we looked at our line, we had a certain amount of number 5 nibs, models that took number 5 nibs, the smaller nib. Number 5 comes from the millimeter of the feet underneath the nib. So there's 5 millimeter nib units and 6 millimeter. That's where the numbers 5 and 6 come from. Internally, we call them 10s and 12s, but that's complicated, a Jowo thing. We don't publicly.
Your Emperor, Dr. Brown, has a number 50 nib on it, right?
Yes.
But that can't be the same scale.
No, I don't. That's not. I am bumbling. I think if anything, that might be the length of the nib, because that looks like it's about 5 centimeters. That's a very long
it's
nib,
huge.
but it's definitely not 5
No.
centimeters in feed diameter, because that would be writing very complicated, I fear.
Might be a number 10.
Yeah, something like that, probably, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to Frank and Christoph. Sorry.
Okay, so the number, as we looked at, we have a lot more. Number 6 nibs are a little bit more popular, but we keep number 5 nibs in the line because they allow you to make smaller pins. But as we looked at our line, we had the 65, the 45, the 45L. These are all designed not to have a clip. And then the ones with clips, we had the 451 and the Model 25, which are unusual designs. They're more what I call design-oriented pins with downward pointing nibs. So we needed something in the line that was more of a traditional with a pocket clip and a number 5 pin. So you can basically take a Model 45 or a Model 65 and you have the same section, and then you just shape the barrel you want. And we did our traditional bevels on the finial and that kind of thing. We made it as small as we could on the cap, but to hold the nice clip. Our clips are really 3/4 clips, and so they really lend themselves to large or small pins, and so they fit well. Our old clip would have come down to here and looked a little bit unusual, but this gives us that nice aesthetic balance. And by the way, can they see me, or are they just seeing
They're
the
seeing
picture?
you right now. I wouldn't let you go on like that.
So then to do something a little more unusual, we split the barrel. So what's common is to see barrel finials on the end. A lot of different pen designs and companies have put a different finial on the end, and kit pens are generally that way because they're only making the long part and then they have a pre-made end piece. Or a lot of people have put ink windows in. So you have a sliver here of varying sizes to ink windows. So we decided we try to be as different as we can and split the barrel pretty much 50-50. That either gives you a large ink window if you want to put a clear piece here. And I think if you want to show the picture again, Eric, that one was that the lavender?
Yes, it's the lavender. So I guess it's you can somewhat see through that material.
Yeah, so that material is translucent or semi-translucent, and you can see the ink through there. Our original 55 had antique glass.
Sold
and
out.
Yeah, a few times. I think we have some back. I think it's back on now. I'm
I
not
looked
sure.
this morning. It wasn't there. It said sold
Okay.
out. So
It's sold out again. So we've had, but it allows you to do that, have a large ink window. It gives you kind of that effect if you want to eyedropper it. Same thing here. It's a seam, as we talked about with the 19s and stuff. It's a seam, but it goes deeply in here. It has what we call micro threads that are put together. It has epoxy in there. So the chances of ink getting out of there are pretty slim, and it's not going to come apart the way it's a lot of extra work to do things like that the way we do. They're not just butt jointed, which can work too, but those are more prone to come apart with some pressure. So that's pretty much the way we did it. And then of course we did the section with the block threads on the end, and one challenge we've had, and if you were to get out of calipers and measure over the months since this pen has been out, we have adjusted this end a couple of times trying to get our what we call precision posting, where it's actually making contact in there a good 1/3 to a 1/2 inch so that it stays on firmly. So we've been adjusting the interior of the threads until we get it like this, just the way we want it. So it's been a nice little pen. Even though I have relatively large hands, I tend to like smaller pens. So I write with 45s and 55s and 65s all the time, probably even more so. The number 6 pen I write with the most that I like is the 20. I keep one here on my desk with some of you may recognize the I forget the name of this. What was it?
I forget too. But
Was it the Penwell or something?
What'd you say?
Penwell?
The Penwell or something?
Yeah, I think that's it. But it's an ingenious design where you can put your pen cap in there with foam to hold it. And so this is the pen that sits on my desk every day that I tend to.
I should get one of those for my 66.
Yeah, it would be great for that.
In fact, you should get, if you have 30 pens, you should get 30 and just
As a
glue
matter
them
of
to
fact,
the wall. So
I'm
you can
coming to
just...
that.
Nice.
But before I get to their question, in the comments, are the nibs friction fit or screw in?
Screw in there. If you buy, we sell a lot of individual nibs as well, and we call them nib sets. So a nib set will have the housing, the feed, and the metal nib part. You get all that together, and they just screw out and screw in the different pins. Some companies, even when they have that, they will glue the housing in. We don't do that. So many of our clients will have multiple nibs, or they'll switch nibs between pins, and that way you might only have a pin or two, but you could have 4 or 5 nibs to give you a lot of different writing options.
I need one pen body per nib.
Well,
But
we like that too.
Speaking of having multiple Franklin Christoph pens in particular, what is it about your pens that inspires people to buy so many of them? Because it seems impossible to own just one Franklin Christoph.
If I knew, I would. No. I think
I knew I wouldn't tell you.
I think I don't know. I just think what people, when we talk about all these details of designs and why we did this here and I think a lot of times you get a pen based on, oh, that's a neat color. I like that color. It's the shade of blue that I like and stuff. But when you realize that something is really well thought out and it works really well and it's made to last and you appreciate all those little nuances of it, it makes you want more. It makes you want to try different models and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of great pen companies and a lot of, you see people that do the same thing. They have umpteen Pelicans or they have umpteen Lamies or whatever it is. But companies, I think, that really think through their design, you're just going to see a little bit more of that. Of course, we did the 50th pen. You buy 49, you get 50 free. And I didn't think, we had a client that reached that. Had one a long time ago that did 100 pens, but he had passed away. And so Lisa Smith, who lives in Charlotte, been a long time customer of ours, and she told me that she wanted to. She was asking what was coming down the pike. She wanted to pick something special for her 50th, and I said, "Wow, 50!" I said, "I'll tell you what, we'll make anything you want for a special occasion. We can't do that in general. Over the years, we get a lot of people ask us to make one-off pens, or can I send you? It's just not logistically feasible for us to do production that way to be able to make as many pens as we need to make, but for these special occasions, we'll do this." And we engraved Lisa's 50th pen on it. Well, that became a big motivator for people. And we now have 15 50 pen club members, and we have 3 100 pen club members. We have a secret 150 club member that didn't want to recognize it. And so it's been very interesting, and it's fun, and you do that and you get to that number and you get to basically kind of design something, find some material you love, get us to make one of our models in it. We don't do, there's a difference between customizing, making an existing model versus the material. We don't do anything. To do a single pen the way we make things on CNC is just not feasible, because we have all these back and forth samples, all this programming that has to be done. So for us to go through that process, it needs to be something we're going to sell for a while. So some people don't understand that, versus some of these guys who are more artisans and they do things on a manual lathe, and it's easy for them to sort of make adjustments and do truly custom work. That's not something you're going to see in a CNC shop like ours, at least not, to stay efficient.
So I'm not wrong. It is not unusual for people to own multiple Franklin Christoph pens. I'm not the only one.
Seems to be, yes. Yeah.
I'm going to show a picture I showed last week. It's something I saw on Instagram, something that you threw up in what you call the stock room. I think it's the 45. It was the Southwestern material.
Yes, that was a 45L.
45L.
Yeah.
The material was what caught my attention. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And of course, they're all gone. But I did talk about it last week when you weren't here. And I just wanted to follow up this week with if I were interested in some of these things that you do special like this, how do I find out about them? Is it just Instagram?
Well, Instagram is your best bet because we have so many people on our email list that if we send out an email and there are only 30 pieces, it'll be sold out in 2 minutes, and then we'll have a lot of frustrated people. Hey, I just got this email. I clicked on it, and it wasn't there. So Instagram is a little bit more surgical marketing, I guess you could say. So we can put something on there, and it may last then for a long enough time. We do a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of Twitter. When we do like a big antique glass run or something, we may do it on all of those things. Best bet is Instagram. You can still catch us on Twitter, Facebook, and of course sign up for our email.
I've already got your Instagram name in the description of this video. It's Franklin Christoph, in case anybody's wondering. So
that causes a problem for us, by the way.
I'm sorry. Should I take it off?
No. They don't allow hyphens in the name. So as so many people have become familiar with us, they think it's Franklin Christoph, and they think it's probably a first name Franklin, last name Christoph, and they can't see that hyphen. So you can always tell somebody who really knows us from somebody we're new to by whether they put a hyphen between Franklin and Christoph. But because of that handle without the hyphen, it makes it, and the only way to get to our website is franklin-christoph.com. So I should probably go out and get franklinchristoph.com without the dash, but
probably. At the same time, you should go buy Instagram from Facebook and make a change to how they allow names.
Yeah. You might need to loan me a little bit of.
I've got my checkbook's open, right there. I just wanted to mention something innovative. I thought is in February you did an online pen show. How did that work for you? Are you going to do another one?
Yes, it was something that I've been wanting to do for years, some sort of online pen show. Of course, it's...
we kind of need online pen shows at the moment.
Right. It was interesting. We were a month ahead of our time, with that. But when Jim Rouse was here, I'll tell the whole story. When Jim Rouse was here, he hated the idea that a pen show could be going on anywhere, and he wasn't there. So we would consequently do about 13 pen shows a year. That's really hard on the shop. It's really hard on our staff traveling. It's kind of a brutal schedule. You're talking about and they tend to get bunched up too. So you may, it's like you're just recovering from one show and you're already having to get packed and get special, because we do special inventory for the shows. So the shop gets crazy and it just causes a lot of stress. So we cut down to 8 shows. And then I went to Japan by myself. It kind of was technically a night show, but 8 shows as far as a company and staff. And that was a little bit more palatable number. But then to balance that out, we wanted to do an online pen show. So in February, we had that gap. We no longer do the LA show. So we do our big Philly show in January. We have Baltimore in March. And so we had that sort of time in February. So we decided to do this online pen show. It wasn't really fully planned out as far as what to produce. We kept doing small additions in the shop, and they kind of were backing up on us here. So I said, well, let's do a few more and make it into a pen show. So we didn't have a good balance of all the models and all the materials and all that, but we put it out. We had 16 different models with number of pens ranging anywhere from, I think it went from 15 to one of the models we had 90 pieces. And so it turned out to be a great success. Of course, we pre-notified everybody on email, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So there was an awareness that it was coming at X time on the X day. And within 12 hours, we sold as much as 2 DC shows worth.
In 12 hours?
In 12 hours.
Without leaving the shop.
Without leaving the shop. And so that immediately got people worried that we were just going to drop pen shows altogether, but that's not true. If we, at some point when we have pen shows again, we will continue to do pen shows, and it's important to us to have that face-to-face time and that interaction, and that's a place that people can come pick up and test and try pens. But I thought what we would do is we would do one every year in February and say maybe one every year at the 1st of November. But because all of this has happened, where everything's kind of been shut down and we've lost some of the pen shows already, around the 1st of June, we're going to do another one. This time it's going to be a little bit, we're already, Brian, I haven't talked about our situation. I'm probably the only CEO in America who hasn't sent out an email explaining in detail.
Yeah, I've been missing that from you. I've been waiting.
Yeah, so.
But it is really comforting. I find it so comforting to know how Dunkin' Donuts is handling the COVID-19
I slept really well that
You know,
night when I got that.
After I got the 57th email from somebody talking about exactly how they were doing, even when those are relevant to the public in most cases, I decided I would not send one out. But I'll tell you guys what, we have a sort of a split building here. It's kind of 2 units that we married in together, we cut in together. And one unit has an open floor plan, and that's the production side. And the other unit is more of a normal office sort of thing with several small offices and then one big one in the back. And so for the most part, it's been Brian on one side, he's the director of manufacturing, and me on the other side. And I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off trying to get all the shipments out every day. I've been doing all the nib work and pen building and all of that. And he's been doing my production. Over the course of the 8 weeks or so that we've been shut down, we've had various employees that have volunteered to come in here or there. So we have had on some days an extra person to help ship on this side, and we might have a person to come in to polish in the polishing room on that side. So we've never had more than 4 people in the building during this time. We are scheduled as of Monday to bring back a great deal of our staff. We could have done it last week under the state guidelines, but I decided to give it another week. And we're leaving. We have 2 employees over 60 that I've asked to stay home still with pay. But one of them has some underlying conditions, and so she'll be the last one to kind of come back. But I feel like we're pretty safe here because of our spacing. We're well spaced out. We have to take special precautions in the bathrooms and in the meeting room, break room, to be very careful about how we interact with one another. But for the most part, we're able to kind of stay in our stations and stay in our lanes and not. Yeah, and to be safe, because it's going to be like we were discussing, and it's going to be a long time before things can truly go back.
Right, it's going to be quite
normal
if they ever go completely back. We'll just.
But we're excited to be able to get our product. We've been, as hard as Brian's worked over there running those machines, there's only so much one man can do, and so our production has been very low, while our online sales have been fairly close to normal. And so we're going to be stretched for inventory.
But you'll have all of that solved by, you said, June 1st? I mean, 3 weeks,
Well,
you're going to do an online show?
Part of what we've been doing is letting the general stock. One thing people don't see is our number one seller are still black pens. You almost never see one on Instagram. But it's like we have this other clientele that buys these dark emerald, the black, the maroons, the thing that we're kind of known for aesthetically in some ways. Those have been but we've been allowing that inventory to sell down a little bit while he's been making smaller batches in preparation for the pen show. We're going to have about 20 different models that are special editions just for that.
Did I hear you right about June 1st or just in June?
Sometime in the first part of June.
Okay.
I don't know what day it'll work out. The other thing we're going to do a little bit differently is because we'll have more editions that might have a little bit smaller numbers, we might release 5. We get a lot of heat from different time zones. If we release something, it's not ideal to one time zone or another. Those people get upset with us. So we're going to release maybe 5 initially, and then where we get to where, then Asia is awake, we'll release 5 more, and then we'll, and so on, so that we'll sort of stagger it. And it'll be interesting. You check back in, see what's new, in the morning.
Right. Will some of these be prototypes like you do at a regular pen show?
Well, not one-offs.
At pen shows you have one-offs.
Right. We'll have like one of a kind. They may get repeated a few times in what we call color prototypes. That's just hard to do feasibly, where you've got to photograph it, build a web page around it, the shopping cart, the whole
Right,
nine
right,
yards.
right.
That's tough to do for just one pen. And it's also frustrating for people because 4 or 5 people can see it, put it in the shopping cart, but the one that hits checkout first is the only one that gets it, and then everybody else tries to go check out, and that causes a lot of distress. So we try to have some volume and numbers anytime we
So you
do
still
something.
have prototypes, but they'll be more than just single
There'll be
editions.
there'll be 20, 25 pieces in it. Yeah.
And from the comments, someone asks, how do you decide which prototypes to make?
Well, for like this, I'm guiding everything. I'm sort of the designer of the company and the aesthetic director and brand manager, and so I come up with crazy names like Sex and Candy, and I pick the different color combinations. I tend to work with Jonathan Brooks and Tim McKenzie when they're doing custom acrylics. I'll give them like a formula. I'll say one that we're about to come out with. I'll give a little heads up here. It's a navy blue, white, and pink. And I give them 90% navy blue, 5% pink, 5% white, and a striated kind of look. And so I'll give them that guideline, and then they'll do their magic to make stuff. So there's that. But when it comes to the one-off color prototypes, if that's what they're asking that you see at pen shows, I used to do all that, but I've long since sort of handed that over to machinists, and I'll say, okay, we need 10 more Model 02s. And so the machinists go and they grab materials and come up with stuff. Some of them are better than others at doing that, but
all of them
they
find
get,
someone to love them. So
yeah, eventually. Yeah. There have been a few colors that I just, I look at and I'm like, oh my goodness, that yellow and black, and it's made it through 3 shows and nobody wanted it. But then somebody finds it and it's the best thing for them. So everything eventually, but there are some that I've asked them, don't make any more. Don't make any more of those.
I don't know when we'll get back to doing regular pen shows, but one thing I will say about regular pen shows and the Franklin Christoph tables that I really enjoy is that you have a bunch of testers with all your nibs, and people can sit down and play with the tester pens until they say, okay, this is the nib that I want, and then all they have to do is pick the model that they like most. And you don't see a lot of tester pens at pen shows. In fact, when I first got into fountain pens, I couldn't believe you can't write with these pens. How am I supposed to buy a pen if I can't write with it?
Well, and if you look at it, retailers can't really do it. These are expensive pens, and if they're inked, people will say, well, it's now a used pen. And so they have so many different brands, and they may only have 1 or 2 of each. So they can't do it.
No, yeah. Now that I am where I am, I understand the thinking.
Yeah.
The first time I went to a pen show, I didn't understand that. But you actually have tester pens.
And that's another reason that I think pen shows are so essential to us, because if you've never, you do the drop down and you see there are 28 options for the Model 02 or whatever it is, and you may have no idea. But if you can get yourself to a pen show and sit down with that tester kit, you can say, oh, I really love the medium metallic Masseyama, or I love the Sig Broad, and by testing it yourself, and then you can kind of go from there. Otherwise, you're just kind of flying blind. It's interesting to watch this is something I don't think I've ever talked about. Watch the evolution of clients, and so when they first start out, they stick with something safe, like just a regular fine or regular medium, and then they might get into Masseyama or Sigs. But what's very interesting to me is some of our most seasoned collectors or users of our pens tend to migrate a little bit back, at least some of the time, to factory nibs that are fines or mediums or broads, because they're so intrinsically smooth to write with. And you find that, you sort of get enamored with the italicized. Now, that said, me personally, I would choose a Masseyama broad stub or a Sig medium or something like that for me and most of my pens, because it really helps me with an italicized nib to have more interesting and legible handwriting.
Yeah, that's why I like them too, because I don't change anything about the way I write, and suddenly there's a little bit of line variation that I didn't even have to work for. It's just the pen moving on the page.
What that tester kit allowed us to do was give people more of an experience at a pen show that's a process. They sit down, they take their time, they write with all of these different nibs, they come up with something they like. then they find a pen body that they're attracted to that feels good in the hand, and then they buy that, and then we make it for them. If there's time in front of them, we'll put the thing together, tune up the nib, let them test it, let them tell us if they want adjustments.
Yes, it is. It's quite an experience at Franklin Christoph. And you get 4 or 5 tables in a row, and you just start at one end and work your way down to the nib table, and then you.
Right.
It's very. I hope we can do pen shows again someday.
Yeah, I do too, and they're trying to squeeze them all in late summer and stuff, but I'm very skeptical. First of all, it'd be very hard on vendors like us to do 5 shows in 6 weeks or whatever wind up being. But also, I think we're going to have a lot of ups and downs in this virus situation, and so getting a large group of people like that together in a confined space is going to be a tough thing to do.
You did mention your domain name, so I'll just put it on the screen there. It's franklin-christoph.com. We have a couple of questions I want to touch on very quickly. Maki-E pens, you do those from time to time. Any plans to do more?
Yes, we're currently working with our Diamond Tree, which was, I mentioned the 40 Panther, so it's the first time we've done Maki-E on a 40 Panther. Friend of mine named Mr. Nishihara in Japan does that Maki-E work, and he makes those for us about 10 pieces at a time. So we have sold out numbers 1 through 29, and he's currently working on number 30 through 39, I think, and then we'll do the last batch altogether, which will be number 40 through number 51. So we have 2 more batches coming on that one. Now's the point where I start thinking about what's the next one that we'll do, and so I've been thinking about that, and he's made a couple of suggestions. The way that process works is I generally design something like did the Silver Dragon before on the 03. The original one a long time ago that he did was the Diamondback. We try to do unusual, not just sort of pens that you see on most of these Asian Maki-E designs. We try to do something that's a little bit relevant to us or a little bit oblique, and so the Diamond Tree was just that, our little diamonds that you see in our logos and everything. It was a tree that had that as the fruit, and he's just very good at doing that, being able to take a drawing and transferring that onto making something beautiful on a pen. So we'll try to do at least like one edition like that. We keep it truly a limited edition, only do 51 pieces, and not something that's just, not really limited. When you get up to so many hundreds or whatever, that's all you'd be able to sell anyway. So we try to make it something.
It's limited to the number of pens I can sell.
Right. There are a lot of things like that I consider brand enhancements. This is talking a little bit more strategically. They're brand enhancements rather than money makers. So we're not going to go like to the well too much on it. It's not really something we're trying to make a lot of money on. It's just something that's nice to be part of the brand. I view ink that way. It's hard to make money at ink. I don't see how these guys do it, but we do ink so that we have more of a comprehensive full brand to include our inks. But the bottles and the caps and the ink and the labels and all that's very expensive, and the shipping costs a lot, and so it's hard to sell something for $8.25 and make money at it.
Dr. Brown did his first run of SBRE Brown all by himself, bottled it and everything. I noticed you moved away from that.
I didn't actually bottle it, but I will say that I went from having Diamine bottle it to Diamine sending me, actually not me, but sending Ackermann jerry cans of ink, and the cost I think was cut by 75% or something. Yeah. So I know what you mean. The bottles, even tiny bottles are expensive. Bottling takes time, and people don't always understand that. And I often get the question, why is your ink this expensive? Well, it's in an exclusive bottle, which is available in only one shop in the world. The bottles need to be made. The caps need to be made. There are rubber stoppers in the caps. There are labels that need to be made. The bottles need to be boxed up and taped up and foamed up to make sure they don't break in shipping. So unfortunately, ink is more expensive than you may think. And yes, there are companies like Waterman who can make inks that cost almost nothing, but I mean, they make 700 million trillion bottles a year, so to speak. So I mean, that is a different type of amount you're talking about, right?
And
Hashtag
I
that.
was gonna mention ink. In fact, I will. But before I do, I'll mention something I wasn't really planning to talk about. But someone in the comments has asked about Franklin Christoph watches.
Yes, I'm. It's funny. I'm a watch collector, not a pen collector, and I love fountain pens and particularly mechanical pencils. But the reason I don't actively collect fountain pens is because I have so many in my brand. So when I want a new pen, I just get one made. But watches are what I sort of get into, and I probably have 100 Swiss mechanical watches or so. In fact, I was going to sell. There are about 50 of them I never use anymore. So I thought about I'm going to sell those in the stock room. In fact, I was about set to do it, but then I realized that during this thing, people would think it was an act of desperation. Oh, look, he's selling off his personal assets. So I'll just wait till everything kind of gets back to normal. And frankly, I haven't had the time because there'll be a lot of photography and stuff. But so I had wanted to do a Franklin Christoph watch. There are a lot of different places you can go to find cheaply made watches, but I wanted a true Swiss watch with a good Swiss mechanism. And so it took me a while to find a good maker that would do all that for me, where we would have a true Swiss watch. And we got the Solita mechanism, which is a very solid mechanism, and really like it. In fact, I was in the process of doing the second watch design, and we've kind of got all that put on hold. But that'll be something that will continue. It's kind of like pens in the early years when I started in pens. It took me a long time to sell my first 100 black Model 01 IPO Franklin Christoph pens. It's taken a long time to sell our first black Model 01 IWO initial watch offering pens, and it'll take a long time, and that's a big competitive market to try to break into. So it's another thing that's viewed as a brand enhancer, and maybe down the road it could be something that's fruitful for us economically. But yeah. So do they have a specific question about that watch, or just in general? Or?
It was just, are you going to keep doing watches? I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It may not work out to where we get the second watch this year because of this delay, but we'll have the second one coming out sometime as soon as we can. We'll do different sizes and that kind of thing. The first one is a 42 millimeter, which is very in vogue at one point in time, but now the trend has gotten smaller again. So we're looking at 38, 39, 40 millimeter right in there, which I've found that I prefer 40 millimeter, 42 these days myself. So.
And to find out about these things, you say follow you on Instagram and also sign up for your newsletter, right?
That's the main thing, yeah. Those two things,
Instagram and newsletter, and you can probably sign up for your newsletter at your website.
Yeah.
Okay. And pens are not the only thing you do. You have mentioned inks. I want to just quickly mention this Sling Bag, which
right.
I put a picture up of on screen right now because I understand it is very popular.
Yes, it's been a real winner for us. That one, I think I was telling you guys in the green room, that was a Catherine Moussouk design, and she also co-designed with me the Vagabond Notebook.
What I'll show next.
That was, we'll segue to that, but that was more of a 50-50. This one, she did 90% of the design. I made a couple suggestions and material suggestions. We used the same materials that we used on our backpack that we had developed. So it's the same black or dark brown canvas, the same black or brown leather trim. And but the design of that bag has been very popular. It's very useful in a lot of ways for different people. It's also kind of modular. The pockets will fit some of our other accessories very well. And
yeah, because I go to your website and I expect to find pens, and I do find pens, but I find all kinds of other stuff. A sling bag, and you just mentioned the Vagabond. These are notebook covers, correct?
Right. Yeah, they're travelers notebook covers,
Right.
which is it's a whole thing in and of itself, a whole culture, a whole community, a whole marketplace that does that. But it's so closely aligned. Anything that has to do with paper, it has to do with pens, and so we did our own. We called them Vagabond because we sort of used this rough canvas, this we umber and umber is the dark tan canvas, and ashen is this gray canvas, and it's kind of marked up and easily marked up, and it looks like something that some wayward traveler would be going around with, you know. And so we called it the Vagabond notebook cover.
So
and
the traveler's notebooks fit in these. Do you
so we
also
made,
sell your own sized
right,
notebooks for these?
you know,
Okay.
we've got corners on our paper, literally, and so we have our own refills that use. In that case, we use bamboo extract paper to make our paper, which is great for fountain pens, same as our sugarcane paper in most of our notebooks. But it fits travelers notebooks. So we have a lot of people, they'll get the different calendars or the different travelers notebooks they like, get our cover, put it in there, mix in our
Yeah,
notebooks,
they're
and
gorgeous.
they all work. So yeah. And we've come out with the new NWF material, which is the hot thing right now, which NWF, do you have the photo of that one?
Is that the Sling Bag or the Vagabonds?
Vagabonds. It's
Vagabonds
the
are on the screen.
different colors.
Yes, I've got them.
Okay, so that's NWF material, which is a natural wood fiber. It's a fancy form of paper, but we don't call it paper because it would lead people to believe it's fragile, and if it got wet, it would disintegrate. That's not true. It's actually as strong, if not stronger, than most leather products. So it's a very durable, tough product, and it lends itself well. And it's made a lot. We have a growing vegan clientele. It's made a lot of people happy that there's an alternative to leather in some of these things, which of course we did with the canvas, but also with this. And it's very interesting. You can get it in a lot of different textures. These sort of look like interesting leather, or sort of what I call boutique leather,
They do,
but they're made of a form of paper, natural wood fiber. So we're going to do we're doing a couple of new custom colors in that coming down the pike, and we're going to do different products in it, and so it'll grow and be a big part of what we are in the future.
One of the Franklin Christoph products that I have liked for many years is paper. I did get a picture ready of that. I've got the notebook, the pads on screen now, and my understanding is the paper is cane or sugar cane or
Right, it's made from sugarcane extract, so it doesn't cut down trees to make it. They're not using wood pulp; they're using that, and they're farming the sugarcane for the sugar, obviously. So this is a byproduct of that. But we found that with a couple of, we could take a sugarcane paper, and then with a couple of adjustments, we were able to get the paper factory to make us a formula of paper that just works really well with fountain pens, so it's absorbent and doesn't feather and doesn't
exactly.
bleed through.
I will attest to that. It's excellent fountain pen paper, very fountain pen friendly. And you have quite a line of paper, but not all of it is sugarcane. You just said something about bamboo.
Most of it's sugarcane, but the 5.3 notebooks, which are 3.5 by 5.5, and the traveler's notebooks are made of bamboo extract. It's you almost can't tell the difference, but technically they're different.
And to wrap things up, I'm just going to show a picture of your ink swatches, because you do sell ink, and your inks are very well behaved and come in many different colors. My personal favorite is the Spanish blue, and you get a lot of ink in your bottles. In fact, they're full. They're very full.
They're full. We found too, though, something else that's changed. When I first started in this 20-something years ago, you had like Stephen mentioned, Waterman and Mont Blanc and Pelican, and they would all have 4 or 5 colors. And if you decided you like blue black, you just got a couple of big bottles of blue black and you were done. But these days, people love the different colors and nuances of ink, and they change inks rapidly. So we went down to a 1 ounce for a traditional bottle, so they could be less expensive. You could buy more variations, and that's been very popular. And then we have the eyedropper bottle, which is another Jim Rouse legacy. He found that bottle on the thing and said, "Hey, man, this is cool. So many people are eyedroppering our pens," and so we sell that in a 2-ounce format. You can still dip your nib traditionally in it, but it's great if you want to eyedrop your pen. It's very clean, and you don't literally need an eyedropper. Or more people probably use a syringe
these days, yeah.
But yeah, we enjoy our inks, and we, of course, as you know, running the Philadelphia show, we do a special ink every year for that show, and that's become increasingly every year we make more, and every year they sell out faster. So we've been always make a special color for that show, and you know, hint, we'd be happy to do a SBRE brown sometime for you.
He's probably in bed with Ackerman on that one, but I have been telling him to make SBRE blue.
Yeah.
Yes.
For years, I've been telling him that. So when he does it, just remember, everybody, it was my idea, my suggestion, my prodding. And you could probably do it with Frank and Christoph. You just license your name for it. Wash your hands.
Yes. No, I agree that the maybe at some point it may be required to do some sort of upgrade to the line, because I do get requests from people to do either to do other colors or to add colors or to do something. So currently my idea is to sell SBRE Chameleon, which is water in a bottle, and it assumes the color of any paper you write on. So that might be success.
I'm bringing up Jim Rouse a lot, but he and I, when just the two of us would do shows, we always had a bottle of water and an ink bottle, and we had an invisible ink label on it, and we would. Sometimes people really wanted to buy it. But,
nice.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think it would sell well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm calling it quits for the day. Scott, thanks for being here and taking your time.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, I enjoy it.
And happy Mother's Day to your wife from the two boys that stole you away from her.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Stay safe. See you online.
See you next time. Bye.
Adios.
I will tell you, both of you, when we are officially offline, because I am clicking end broadcast.